Thank you for joining me on the Get What You Want podcast, where getting what you want isn't always what you think it is. My wish for you is that this show will create an awareness within yourself of what you really want and the possibility of getting it. Let's go create. My guest today is Linda Seger. Linda holds 3 master's degrees, as well as a PhD in theology and drama. She is an author of 16 books, has given seminars and speeches in 33 countries around the world. Raised a 1950s Republican and a Lutheran, her political and religious evolution led her to become a Democrat and a Quaker. She is a born-again Christian, was a fundamentalist and evangelical for several years in one way or another. And she has been associated with the Southern Baptist, United Church of Christ, Lutheran, Methodist, Presbyterian churches. She serves on the board of Christian Democrats in America. And she has also been a county caucus chair, has served as a delegate for the Colorado County and State Democratic Convention. So, wow. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you so much.
I don't usually do politics on my show. And I am not usually super controversial, but for some reason, your book stood out to me. And that book is called Jesus Rode a Donkey. And I think that for me, I have, like you, been in a bunch of churches. Like I've spent my life kind of trying to discover, where I fit in. My parents were Catholic and Protestant. And I went to a bunch of churches, and then I joined the Mormon church when I was 15. And so I kind of went from this democratic lifestyle younger, and we were super poor and it was super helpful to us. And then as I got older, I switched to Republican. But honestly, to tell you the truth, my whole thing is about can we all just love and get along? And so that's why yours stood out to me, because I think that there's a lot more that maybe some of us don't know, where we maybe blindly followed politics because of religion. And I don't know that those two necessarily should mix, but they definitely right now is totally controversial. So I would love for you to just tell me more about you and whatever you want to say right now that just kind of led up to this interview.
Well, I switched to being a Democrat in the 1970s, and I got attracted to the social justice issues. So I began to, I would say, expand my consciousness. If you grow up white middle class, you might not necessarily know other places in the world. And I would say my consciousness really expanded when I got a master's degree in feminist theology.
Wow.
And that was my 3rd master's. I already had 2, and I had a doctorate. We had other people in the class. They were African American, they were Hispanics, some of them were poor. And I went to the Philippines to do 10 days working with a charity. It was actually a Catholic charity. Mm-hmm. And again, finding out about the poor in the third world and the problems, and sort of becoming much more empathetic. Also, I began to think about how our religious values become expressed in society. So when we vote, we are doing a values vote, meaning what do we really care about? Do we care about the environment? Do we care about the poor? Do we care about racism? Do we care about sexism? What are those many, many issues? So in Jesus Rode a Donkey, which is the 5th edition now, I expanded, and I have a chapter on immigration, but welcome the stranger. So I began to feel my values aligned more with the Democrats, just as I looked at a number of social justice issues. Then the 1st edition was done in 2006, and I did huge amounts of research for that edition. I had not really been that involved in terms of politics, but I was asked by a publisher to do a book on, their original idea was Jesus was a Democrat. And I said, well, I can't do that book because I think Jesus was an independent. Mm-hmm. But I said, I know what you're getting at. And if you can come up with a title that I would like, I'm all in. And when they said, they gave me 10 titles, and I said, I love Jesus Rode a Donkey. It's kind of lighthearted and humorous. And I then got incredibly interested in how our democracy, how our Christian values, how the political party we choose all come together.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting because I think that for the most part, we don't do a ton of studying. I mean, I'm just speaking for myself, right?
Yes.
I definitely was not a middle class white American at that time. I was definitely low class, and now, living in a little bit more upper class. And I think that, we kind of just go with what we're told to go with, right? And that goes with a lot of the things that I teach, is kind of getting rid of that story of what we're told and actually becoming aligned with who we actually are. And I think that this is super important because I do believe that values on both sides are getting a little bit out of control. And, and why can't I always have this question, my son, who's 24 and always questioned everything, was here the other day. And he was just saying, like, why, I don't understand, like, why we have to believe one way or the other. Like, why can't we have our own values, but still vote with whatever we want to vote with? And what if one of our values don't align with that? And so speak into that a little bit more.
Yes. Well, we are influenced by various people. And sometimes we say, I really like that person. I like the way they think. And a couple people that influenced me. I had a magnificent mother. We grew up Republican, the whole family, and my mother and I became Democrat, and my sister and my father stayed Republican, although my sister would occasionally say, I'm an independent, but I don't think she ever voted other than Republican. So, but I had an uncle. He was a very renowned professor at University of Virginia in the area of American history and diplomacy. He was a Democrat from way back. He influenced my mother. My mother then started to influence me, not by things we said, but just kind of by maybe discussing what comes up in the world and in our life. And you think about it, and one of the things in Jesus Rode a Donkey, since it's written obviously from the Christian viewpoint, every chapter begins first with scripture. What does the Bible say about immigration, abortion, homosexuality, war and peace? You can go right down the line. Then the second thing is, well, what does the politics say about it? And how do those line up when you look at various political parties? And then the third thing is, what does my experience say about it? So if I have an attitude, let's say, about gays, and I've never met a gay, it would be really good for me to meet one before I actually decide where I fit.
Right.
So I'll just recount a story that happened in 2016. I have a theory that we all have stopping places in our lives, these boundaries and these places where we said, I'm not sure about going there. And for instance, growing up in a white little town, I had a stopping place with African Americans. I'd never met any, got to college, met some, wasn't friends with anyone. And then after a period of time, I thought, I have to get over this kind of sense of what, is this person Black or not? Right. So I really worked on that. I joined a group that was Black and whites together, actually Presbyterian. And I kind of worked at, how do I engage? How do I move forward instead of back? And over the years, I think we sometimes say, oh, Hispanic, I haven't been around Mexicans, I've never known any, now I'm going to move forward. So my thing that happened in 2016 was transgender. I had never met a transgender person, and being I was a caucus chair, I went to some of the conventions. I met two, and there was a third one where I had a very brief interaction. I think the person was selling popcorn or something. And I realized I was doing the same thing. I had this stopping place where I was pulling back and not engaging instead of moving forward. one of these transgender women did a speech, and it was a very good speech. And I would have ordinarily gone into this and told her that. And instead, I just sort of pulled back and said, Linda, get over this, stop it, because I don't want to have other people as what I would call the other indifference. There's a saying that says, nothing human is foreign to me, or nothing foreign is human to me. And I said, I want to say nothing human is foreign to me. I don't want stopping places. Isn't that a great saying?
I love it.
So I purposely started to engage. And if I saw either Misty or Shari, I would say hello and how are you? And I'd ask them, I started to engage. At one point I had Shari over for dinner, or dinner party. And I really liked her. I thought she was very smart, and I felt privileged in a sense to get a sense of that journey. So one of the things when you say about getting along is, yes, we all have stopping places. Republicans and Democrats have stopping places against each other. Yes. Like, oh, and there can be so much hatred. And so one of the things is, how do we learn to get past that and engage and say, I don't want stopping places in my life?
Oh my gosh, this is just it's so good because it kind of takes everything, like the argument out of it, right? And I vote Democrat. I vote Republican, and yet there's this cognitive dissonance in me because I have a brother that's gay. I love him. Like, he's one of my best friends. I love his husband. Race has never been something that was foreign to me. It's always been, that saying, it's always been something where, sometimes I want the skin color that's darker. I lay out in the sun all the time, and yes. I don't know. I've just never really separated that in my mind at all. And maybe it was the way I was raised. Maybe it's just like my personality, but so there is like this cognitive dissonance in me because I always think am I supposed to be separating people from me? Am I supposed to, be against my gay brother? Am I supposed to not have friends that are other races or have gender issues or whatever? But for me, it's always been super neutral. We're just all the same. And I don't think it even became different to me until I hear all this fighting and arguing. And I keep thinking inside me, are people really like this? This stopping point really makes sense, because yes. I think sometimes maybe they don't even know that they're doing it. But when you feel that hesitancy or you feel that, pull back, then you can actually be aware. And awareness is my favorite word ever. And so you can actually be aware that something is changing in you, and then actually attack that head on. What is it? And how do I make this different? And where's it coming from?
Well, and part of what's going on now is we're having this huge shift with Black Lives Matter and with protests. And Michigan started something that was called implicit bias training, meaning, they didn't actually use the word racism, but what they're really saying is we carry around these implicit biases, and it might not just be about race. It can be it can be about gender, it can be about political party, whatever it is. We have learned that. There's that wonderful song in South Pacific about we've got to be carefully taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly made and people whose skin are a different shade. We've got to be carefully taught. And so we grow up with a certain influence, a certain attitude, and then at some point say, let me take a good look at that. I've had people read Jesus Rode a Donkey who are Republicans and who have said, it really opened my eyes because I hadn't thought of it that way. Because we get into a certain group, we're in a category, and these people shift our thinking, and all of a sudden we're thinking a certain way and say, wait. And I went through that spiritually because I grew up Lutheran. My grandfather and whole lot of people were Lutheran ministers in my family. My father was Presbyterian. And when I was in my 20s, I said, I've inherited my religion. It's like inheriting a political party. Let me look at this. And first the question was, do I want to remain Christian? So I spent 6 months looking at religions of the world and said, yes, I do want to remain Christian. And then I did the church search, and I went to a whole bunch of churches on the whole continuum, from super crazy on both sides. And I went to a Quaker meeting and walked in, and I sat down and said, I'm home. This is what fits me. And I think a lot of spirituality, a lot of political parties, a lot of these things have to do with, do they suit me? Do they fit me? Do they help me express who I truly am through this kind of category? Well, at the same time, saying I want to be open. One of the tests I do that I suggest for both Republicans and Democrats, said for people on both sides to think of someone from the other party you really like and respect. And if you cannot think of anybody, there's a real problem here. And I do that little test for myself. I respect Mitt Romney, for instance. Policy-wise, we wouldn't be on the same page, but I really respect his decency and his thoughtfulness and how he ponders. I really like John Kasich, the former governor of Ohio. And so you sort of make your list and say, I gotta make sure I have somebody on my list from the other side. And it would be the same thing if somebody were evangelical and said, if you're not evangelical, you're not Christian. Say, start making your list of, I'm what's called a progressive Christian. And that's a different, slightly different than evangelical. But I've been through a whole lot of stages in my life.
Wow. I think I have too. I mean, I would say, like, I tried out a bunch of different churches, when I was younger, and I don't know. I just nothing 100% resonated with me. And I feel like it's because I take from this and I take from that, and even world religions, I love Buddhism. I love so much about Buddhism. And and I used to be like, can I be Mormon Amish, or can I be, can I just be, and what I've realized is I can be whatever I want to be. I don't have to be defined by one religion or one thought process or one political party, or that does not define me.
Right.
Whichever way I vote or whichever church I attend on Sunday, I still am me, and I definitely pull from so many areas. And so I don't know. I think one of the things that I read when I was reading about your book was about how we can bridge this. There right now, the gap is so wide. I don't know that it's ever been this wide, and maybe it hasn't. Maybe I just haven't been aware of it, but right now it's so wide. Give me some ideas on how we, from your point of view, and you've obviously spent way more time studying all of this than I have, but tell me, bridging this gap, is it possible?
Are you feeling stuck in your relationship? Do you feel you need more? Whether it be more time, attention, security, gifts, intimacy, or companionship, your partner is likely experiencing something similar. Yet both of you are not sure how to fix it. In Shirley Baldwin's best-selling book, Get What You Want From Your Man, she will show you how to get all of this and more. Get What You Want From Your Man is available nationwide through all major bookstores, Amazon.com, and through her website, www.getwhatyouwantguru.com.
Well, one of the things that I liked, and there were several previous editions, but before the 2020 edition was the 2016 when Hillary Clinton was running. And before that, she was running for Senate, and she did what she called a listening campaign. She said, I'm here to listen to the people and see what are their concerns. What happens, we get so much into our position. We hold it so tightly and we're so immovable, and we really don't want to hear from other people,
Mhm.
or only if they agree with us. So I think one thing is listening, and the Quakers have something which is not just Quakers, but called compassionate listening, is trying to put yourself into that position. And sometimes I try to listen to what's the experience that formed that person, or what's maybe the fear for. So sometimes people might say, well, I really don't want those immigrants coming in. In fact, the word infestation, terrible, terrible to talk about anyone coming into our country in that way. But you listen and say, what are we so afraid of somebody else, of the person different than us?
Mhm.
And part of us, of course, is to bridge the gap by us having some experiences about that and to listen. I think another thing is to recognize there are some people we really won't be able to relate to. So I have trouble relating much to the extremist of either party. See, but maybe I don't need to do that. What I need to do is to look at who are the moderates, and can we cross over the aisle with them? And there are moderate Republicans and moderate Democrats, and say, well, start there. If you have trouble, so if you have a problem with what would be considered the more extreme, whether it's right or left, start looking for the moderates and connect there. And it's the same thing with people in Congress, that instead of throwing up their hands, I can't talk to anyone, say, well, look for the people you can talk to, because they really are there. There are some people. So I had the experience of going to the Iowa caucus, and I went to hear Joe Biden speak as an undecided voter. One of the things that happened was there was a heckler in the audience, and the person yelled out something, and the crowd started to have that little titter that crowds sometimes do, like shut the person up.
Mhm.
And immediately Biden said, no, he's okay. It's okay.
Wow.
And it was like he had turned this person around. I thought, that's such a kind and caring thing, as he brought the person in. And when I walked out, I said to my friend, I am a better person walking out of that building when I walked in, because my better angels came to the forefront.
Wow.
And I think we really have to work on that. We just work on, how do I get my better angels to come to the forefront? Because there's so many forces right now trying to make us hate each other.
Yes.
So let's get our better angels.
Linda, you are like really talking in my language right now, because I talk a lot and I teach a lot about perspective, and how not only are all of our perspectives completely different because of our experiences, our life, our story, everything that we were taught and told, but our whole life, all of us have been told that there's a right box and a wrong box. And everything has to fit in one of those boxes. And if we're right, that makes every other thing or person wrong. And so I like to just separate those boxes and have this huge space in the middle for just is. And that's where compassion comes in. That's where we learn to love other people in the space that they're at, and that they're just perfect where they are. And it doesn't matter if they don't agree or believe what we agree and believe in. And I think that this is such an important thing for people to listen to right now. And that is, where did that person's perspective come from? We don't know. And it's okay. They're perfect right where they're at.
Yes.
We might actually learn something, right?
Yes. And the Quakers are, all of our decisions as Quakers are made with consensus.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can imagine being in a business meeting and you're all going to find agreement someplace. And Quakers, in a sense, learn not to be hot-headed. We tend to be very tolerant. But one of the things we do is, if there's things that start bubbling up where it's just kind of getting contentious, we go into silence. And we just center and we say, okay, it's time for us to listen to that spirit inside. And a lot of times a third way comes forward. So you said, and this can be, a really big decision is, are we going to take this stand on immigration, and how are we going to word this and taking the stand? Or it can be, are we going to paint the walls yellow, blue, or green?
Right.
And then somebody says, how do I feel about light lavender? Oh, I like that. And so there's always that way where you can find that third creative solution. If you say, let's agree at least on the goal. I mean, right now is we want to help people in the United States that are suffering. If we could agree on that goal, is that true for all of us? Now let's start talking about all the different ways we might do it, but do it with a certain sense of what we all want to. We don't want more people dying. We don't want more people sick and can't pay their rent and are ready to get evicted. So, we do develop that compassion and then say, let's agree on the big goal, and then we can start talking about how to get there.
I love that so much. I totally agree on that. I think that there is a time where we need to listen. And I've struggled with social media lately because so many people want to voice their opinion, but it's coming like anger and hatred and negativity towards others. And there's just so much of that coming out right now that, it's like, it's okay to have an opinion and not share it all the time. It's okay to, but then the other side will say to me, well, I need to fight. Like if I don't stand up, who will? And I'm thinking, well, there's, 5 million other people that are right now too. So, but it's really nice to take that moment, like you say, and not like allow your reaction to be to not react for a minute. Step back, listen.
And it's almost like stopping yourself and saying, now let's go for decency and humanity.
Yes.
And we have a saying in my office, we treat everyone like a decent human being, even if they are not.
I love that.
But I had an experience, 2006, when Jesus Rode a Donkey first came out. I got an email. Her name was Lisa from Ohio. And she just slammed into me in this email. And I was quoted in the Wall Street Journal, and she slammed into that. And she said, what an awful person you are. And she went on and on. And so it took me 2 days to quiet down, but I said, I'm going to quiet down. And I have a thing. I answer all emails. I don't necessarily engage for 6 emails, but I will answer them. So I wrote Lisa and I said, they kind of misquoted me in that article. And if you want to have an article book burning, I will join you because I'd like to burn that article too. And I said, but you're also wrong about me. You're also wrong about you reaching a conclusion about me that's not correct. And I said, go to my website, read about me. I said, don't buy the book. You will not like this book. But I said, I just want you to be accurate and us to be truthful.
Yeah.
And she wrote me back and she said, well, you certainly took the wind out of my sails. And she thanked me for a respectful reply. She said, I'm not going to buy the book. I'm not going to read it. I'm a Republican. I'm going to stay that way. But she said, thank you. And and I think going to that place, like this other person really is a human being. And let me try to speak to, the Quakers have a saying, we speak to that of God in everyone. Not always an easy thing to do, but we work at it.
So it's funny because I was a little nervous having this interview because I'm like, oh, this is going to be political and controversial. And I'm just like a lover. I want everything to be about love and humanity and beauty. And that's what it ended up being. And I'm so grateful for your insight because I feel like our world could really use more of you, more of,
thank you.
There's no reason why we have to fight back, right? My biggest saying is if we change our perspective, we change our reality. And I also believe that who we're being in any relationship is how the other person is acting, reacting, and being back. And you just proved that. You just showed that by that response. So who we are being, which I believe that to me, you seem like you're just full of love and and understanding and facts, and you really have dug deep into facts. But then, even though I know your opinions are probably very strong, they're coming out as love and kindness and, you know, being friendly to everyone. And I know that's a Quaker trait, right? The friends, your friends of spirituality, your friends of everything.
Well, the other, I think there's a fine balance too, because I decided this year that I was not going to cower, because I think what sometimes happens, somebody gives their opinion and we just smile and be nice, even though we really don't agree with that, and we don't agree with that value. So I decided I will always speak up, but not to argue and change someone's mind, even if it's a simple thing. Like my computer guy was saying he hates the protesters and they all should be shot, or he says something. And I just said, we love protesters in this household. And didn't go any further with that. He knows where we stay. He's been in this house. He's probably seen my book. He has a Confederate flag up, and we're really nice to each other. So there is a thing too, and I tell friends who are Republican, I said, I will really try not to start anything, but if you say something, I will respond. And I said, I'm not going to hide the fact I wrote a book about Christian Democrats. Mm-hmm. So with my Republican friends, I sometimes say, well, I was on a really good interview this morning about Jesus Rode a Donkey. We don't have to discuss it or anything, but it just says, I am not going to cower and pretend I didn't write this book. Yeah. And for many years, I kind of hid it a little bit. And I said, I don't want to do that anymore. So there is that fine line. We're firm, but we try to be kind.
I fully understand that, because my book is called Get What You Want From Your Man. And it definitely is not what you think it is by the cover, but yeah, sometimes I'm like, I'm not really an author. I'm not, but I think that there's a really good way. And I have learned this too. We can respond, we can have our own opinions, and we can be like super powerful in our place without being angry or mean or hateful, or without degrading the other person for having a different opinion. Because right. I'm opinionated too, but I also used to not stand up for myself, and it got me in a lot of trouble over the years. So I've learned how to stand up for myself, stand up for my beliefs, but at the same time, like, really love other people for where they're at in their beliefs and their understandings. And I think that that's such a good balance.
I learned an important lesson many, many, many years ago. I had a friend, we were both Christian, and then she became Baha'i. And I got very threatened, and we were talking one night, and she kept saying, well, as we all know, and she would say to Baha'i belief, which was, not mine. And I was sort of doing my cowering routine. And finally I stopped and I said, Stephanie, there's got to be a way we can talk about our religion, because we're both very committed to who we are. And I said, let's figure this out. And we sat there, looked at each other, and we finally started saying, I said, why did you choose Baha'i? And why did you leave Christian? And I will tell you why I stayed Christian. And it was a 3-hour, one of the best conversations in my life. I said, I never want to argue politics and religion anymore. I'm happy to state my opinion. I'm happy to talk about it, but not to argue it, because people have formed their opinions through one way or another. And as we're talking, as someone asks a question and you give the reply, I said, I like that. Let me go look at this in more depth, but it's not about arguing.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for bringing who you are to this conversation today. I feel super enlightened, and I believe that whether you're Republican or Democrat or Christian or not Christian, this book will give you some insight into another person's eyes and beliefs, and I think you can learn something from it. So tell us how we can get your book, and if you have a website or anything else you want to share about yourself.
Well, and if you see it, I don't know. So it's Jesus Rode a Donkey, Why Millions of Christians Are Democrat. And my name is Linda Seger, Seger. It's like Bob Seger, but we're not related. It actually won a book award. It actually won a book award for Christian living from a conservative
Wow.
group that gave out this award, the Illumination Book Award, and it's on Amazon. So just look at Jesus Rode a Donkey and look for the 2020 edition, which is the 5th edition of this book, because all the editions come up, but the 2020 should come up first. And I think that people who read this also, I really work hard on the tone to not have an angry, irritating book, but to really talk about it in a good way. So I think even a Republican can read this book and not feel threatened about it and say, oh yeah, it's opened up my eyes, and maybe makes a change, but maybe not. But
I love it.
We understand each other better then.
Well, I feel honored to know you and to have had you on the show. And I'm super grateful for you being here. And I am going to read your book because I don't know. I love everything about you. So thank you so much. And I hope you have a lot of success with it.
Oh yeah, thank you. And I so enjoyed talking to you, Shirley. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for listening to the Get What You Want podcast. If you loved it, please subscribe, share it with others, and leave me a review on Apple Podcast. You can also visit me on my website at www.getwhatyouwantguru.com. Would love to hear from you. Now go create.